Good afternoon and welcome to Mr. Long Island Seeks Truth and Beauty. My name is Michael Watt, aka Mr. Long Island, and this is the inaugural debut of this program. I'm very grateful to Corinne and Donna for making it happen. We're very excited about being here and discussing issues and things about Long Island that make it so special. My guest today is Cliff Sondock. He's the president of the Land Use Institute. Cliff and I have known each other for years, and I've always known Cliff to have very insightful and educated opinions about developments on Long Island. So Cliff, thank you very much for joining us.
Michael, thank you.
But before we get into our discussion, I do want to explain a little bit about the title, Mr. Long Island Seeks Truth and Beauty. John Keats has a very famous line in a poem. It says, "Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye need. That is all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know." And it just struck me as something poignant for Long Island, because Long Island has a tremendous amount of beauty and not so much with the truth. And I'm hoping with this program to bring a little truth about all the things that make Long Island great, and also all the things that need to be done to make Long Island even better. And when it comes to truth, Cliff, I know you're very truthful, and you're a little beautiful on the side too. So it's
Thank you, Mike.
You're a perfect first guest, and thank you very much for being with us today. Before we get started, I want to little.
By the way, I'm honored, Michael, that you'd have me as your first guest.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to kind of break the ice a little bit, though,
Right.
as you've been on the island now for a couple of decades.
Since 1989.
Okay.
Right.
We're going to throw some questions that every Long Islander should be able to answer.
All right.
Favorite place for pizza?
I'm going to say Phil's Pizza in Massapequa.
Where's that? Now, I grew up in Massapequa. Where's
It's
Phil's
on.
Pizza?
Well, there's two of them. The Phil's Pizza. Actually, there's three. The Phil's Pizza in Massapequa I'm speaking of is on Hicksville Road at Jerusalem Avenue in the
Okay.
Walbaum Shopping Center.
Okay, I'm going to have to check it out now, because
Excellent pizza.
the reason I mention that, years ago I did something called Long Island Magazine, 516 magazine. It was all about things to do in Long Island. And I was pulling a hair out of my head trying to figure out what's the one common thing that every town in Long Island has to share. What's the one commonality? Because you have the North Shore, you have the South Shore, you have Nassau, you have Suffolk, you have the North Fork, some rural areas. Every town on Long Island has a pizza place, at least one. And every Long Islander has a strong opinion about pizza. And I know I live in Babylon Village. I'm blessed with one real close, Manges, and then I will go to Bayshore. I will drive past a dozen pizza places to go to Pie by Salvatore to get their thin crust pizza. So I'm fascinated by that. Everyone in Long Island has strong opinions about pizza, and every town in Long Island, regardless of their social stature, has a pizza place.
I will tell you this: my travels around the country, the pizza in Long Island and the bagels, you can't beat them. They're just amazing how good. And they say it's probably because of the water. Or for some reason,
I don't know what
pizza
it is,
here
but
is
that's
fantastic.
the one commonality, no matter where you're from in Long Island. So, and we're going to keep a catalog of all the best pizza places.
All right.
If you were bringing visitors from out of town, you wanted to show off the region, where would you take them?
Where would I take them? What restaurant? If
Doesn't be a restaurant. What feature of Long Island would you want guests to see?
Oh my gosh, that's tough. Well, at first I was prepared to the question I was prepared to answer was where would I take them to entertain them at a restaurant. And if getting there was no issue, I would probably go to Prime in the village of Huntington.
Okay.
Because it's on the water, it's beautiful, and I would be proud to take somebody there.
Well, and it showcases what Long Island has to offer. I mean, obviously, downtown Huntington Village is tremendous nightlife, very vibrant downtown area, which we'll be getting into. But it's also beautiful Huntington Harbor.
Right.
In the area there, the 5 harbors, Huntington, Lloyd, Cold Spring Harbor, Centerport, and what's the 5th one now? Did I get them all? They'll come to me. There's 5 of them.
All right.
And they're absolutely beautiful.
Right, they are beautiful.
And the fun thing about Long Island, you can be in Huntington, get in your car, drive about 15, 20 minutes, depending on how many lights you hit, and be at Robert Moses on the ocean. And there's very few parts of the country.
In how long? That's one of the things we'll talk about today. But
like I said, depends on the lights.
Right.
If you hit a few lights, but within it's a reasonable amount of drive time.
Right.
You can be in beautiful harbors, 5 harbors, or you can be down on the ocean.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable thing that I don't know that many parts of the country have to offer. And speaking of the ocean, I'm just very curious. When was the last time you swam in the ocean off Long Island?
Well, when I first moved to Huntington, shortly after that, I bought a boat. As I say, the happiest day is the day you buy your boat. The second happiest day is when you sell your boat.
Yes.
But when I had my boat, I guess it was in probably about 10 years ago. I could take the boat out and jump in the water, and I was on the North Shore, so the Long Island Sound.
Okay, so that's not the ocean. Now. We got to get to the ocean.
The ocean, boy, I can't say. Probably about, again, 9-10 years ago, we went to Fire Island, and
and the reason I bring that up is I live Babylon Village. I can get my car 10 minutes. I'll be at Robert Moses, and I've been in the ocean maybe 5 times in the last 10 years.
Right.
It's something about it's kind of like why would nobody go to see the Empire State Building? Because it's there.
Right.
And it's something I think as Long Islanders we need to really more fully appreciate the assets we have available to us.
Right.
And by the way, that's where I would bring somebody if I was bringing them from out of town. You bring them over to Robert Moses Bridge, or the Causeway, down to Robert Moses State Park. That's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the news of the day. And the big news this morning, the Taubman Mall was sold to the Simon Properties. And I'm going to ask you to walk us through all that. But I saw it on the Long Island Business News Wire this morning, and I was like, son of a gun, I'm going to be talking to the one guy who's really got some strong opinions about this.
Right.
You had a Facebook posting that said Taubman Mall was murdered.
Well,
can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that was in response to the Long Island Business News article by Todd Fabricant that said the Taubman Mall is dead.
And Todd Fabricant is the man who kind of led the quote-unquote civic opposition to putting a mall on the Cerro property. And the Cerro property is off of LIE exit 43.
Right, it's Robbins Lane is a main north-south thoroughfare off of the Long Island Expressway. That's correct. Yeah.
And years ago, there was a company named Cerro, C-E-R-O-Y, and it had a big tower. That's why everyone calls it the Cerro property.
That's right.
They left. And it's been vacant really ever since.
Probably for 2 decades, I think. Yeah.
Ironically, Newsday bought the property originally from Cerro, and they were going to put their printing plant there and their whole facilities because of its proximity to the LIE, which we'll get into.
Right.
That obviously didn't materialize, and then it got sold to the Taubman Moore people.
Right. Before I would tackle my thoughts on Cerro Wire and the Taubman property. I think there's a bigger issue because it really affects why I'm so opposed to how the whole Taubman property and the whole mall was handled. Preface it by saying that I thought, the think tank that I'm a part of and I run is very free market oriented. We believe that the role of government in helping a community grow and change is really more through infrastructure improvements than to actually determine what the use of specific property would be.
And when you say infrastructure, you're talking about making sure the roads are maintained, the sewer lines are properly set up, and the garbage is taken away, all the nitty-gritty of...
Not really. That's somewhat, yes. That's certainly, that could be government or it could be the private sector. What I'm speaking of is, if, for example, I'm a big advocate of trying to get a lot of the north and south villages or village centers to grow, you need to have thoroughfares that allow traffic to get from the main arteries, the parkways and the expressways, onto the north and south shore. So that would require an expressway. Okay. So, for example, the Glen Cove Road would become an expressway, or at least there'd be bypasses around some of these towns and villages. So you would try to organize land use more through infrastructure, mostly transportation. Obviously, you need sewer in Suffolk County to allow more density, as opposed to having a zoning ordinance that says on this property is going to be retail, this property is going to be industrial, this property is going to be office. Let the market naturally determine what those properties should be. So
let's talk about zoning a little bit. Right now, the government dictates what kind of activity can take place on a piece of property: residential, commercial, industrial.
Right.
The idea being, if I own a home, I don't necessarily want a 7-Eleven, not to pick on 7-Eleven, but I don't want a convenience store next to my home.
Correct. Right.
And you say we shouldn't have zoning laws. Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Okay. All right. When we speak of zoning, we're talking really about government zoning, government regulation, okay? That doesn't mean there's not rules. For example, in other markets across the country, there are large developments or properties that are developed where the developer puts in certain covenants and restrictions,
okay,
protecting future purchaser of that property, for example, a home, that they're not going to have a 7-Eleven next door to them.
Okay.
So that's private zoning, so to speak, or private land use regulation. What I'm opposed to is government regulation of land use, and particularly, more importantly, because I'm realistic to know that you're not going to get rid of zoning. Okay, but most states across the country don't have local zoning.
Okay.
They have regional zoning.
And when you say local zoning, you're talking about the town and at the village and town level, the town level.
Well, yes. In the states, particularly the ones in the Northeast, they have villages and towns. In Louisiana, you have parishes. Right. In California, you have towns, villages. You might have. Trying to think what else. In Chicago, what are they called? They have different names for them. Yeah, they're like villages and towns.
Okay.
Now, what happens, Michael, is when you have zoning in a very small jurisdiction among very few people, politics, political persuasion, and small political factions grow and can influence what land use is. You know, for example, I use this example. Somebody wants to build, let's say you want to build 200 luxury townhomes in Muttontown. Okay. Well, Muttontown is an incorporated village. Right. So the mayor of Muttontown might say, no, Michael, you can't, we don't want you to build 200 townhomes because I have my constituents, maybe 10 or 15, 20 people who have called me up and they're very upset about that. And that could sway a vote in a small little village like Huntington, Muttontown. If you were to go to, if Nassau County had zoning and the developer went up and wanted to put 200 homes in Muttontown, and the person went to the county executive would say, listen, Michael, you don't want to put these townhomes here, but if I don't put them here, they'll go to Oyster Bay, or they'll go to Hicksville, or to Levittown. So it's not really fair for me to treat this one village or area differently than another. So what happens when you have a larger area and a much larger population, you have a dispersion of power and of any political influence. So a special interest can't really influence a politician to either to prevent a development from happening at a certain place. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. I could see though where the people of Muttontown would say, well, we kind of like having that control over that.
Absolutely, absolutely. But see, that's kind of sort of my point is when you've had this type of regulation since really the beginning. This started from the founding of the state of New York. Right. You know, villages and towns were in existence when the state was founded. So newer states where they had more, you know, they had in some cases telegraph or telephones. They didn't have the problem of getting government power, home rule, to small little jurisdictions. Right. Remember when New York was founded in the 1700s, late 1700s. It wasn't even a state. It was a colony, and you didn't have telegraphs. Right. So it took a long time to get news or get information from Huntington, the village of Huntington, all the way to Albany. Okay. So
they kind of do what they wanted to.
So what happened is most of these states, what they did is they created this home rule where the state empowered these local municipalities to have their own laws. And without any checks or balances. There was no checks or balances.
So they unleashed this horror show now where you have 126 different school districts.
Well, yes, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, what I'm trying to explain is that the way that a real estate market can flourish and grow naturally is if there are less impediments by government to constrain growth. Okay. Okay.
And let's use the Taubman Mall as an example.
Let's go back to the Taubman Mall.
Example. This is really an industrial piece of property right off the LIE, surrounded by other industrial pieces of property.
Correct.
It would seem almost like a no-brainer to put a mall there, or because there's no transit, there's no residential. I shouldn't say there's no residential immediately around it, because obviously there's a civic association that oppose this.
There's supposedly, I believe, 27 civic associations that got together. Right. and created one massive civic group that fought the Taubman Mall.
Right. And the sticking point always was the fact that this coalition of civic associations, their fight was funded by the Simon Mall people. And the Simon Mall people are the ones that own Roosevelt Field.
And Walt Whitman.
And the last thing they want
is competition.
Is competition.
Right.
It took a long time for that to become public knowledge, I would think.
It took some time, right.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very transparent initially.
No.
So you would think that putting a mall there wouldn't have been such a big deal.
No, it shouldn't have been a big deal, and also it's a great location for a mall. Taubman Companies was founded in 1950.
Right. It's
one of the top performing mall developers in the world. They also operate in Asia, in China and Asia. Very, very capable people, very smart people, and very smart company. And they selected that site. They had negotiated and I believe signed leases with Neiman Marcus and Barney's.
Right.
Those pretty smart companies also determined that they would want to go there. And here's a situation where a competitor company will align themselves with a government municipality and civics and create a lot of political pressure and stop a competitor from coming in and building a mall. And it's also the developer, property owner that owns Americana Plaza, was also in bed with Simon to help fund this group, this Stop the Mall group.
So the Stop the Mall effort smacked really of some disingenuousness, that it really, maybe the people in the immediate area were going to be impacted, weren't too thrilled about it, but the reality was it was going to be funded by the company. You're really stifling competition, which is never good.
It stifles competition, and also what it does is it doesn't allow the market to really determine land use.
Right.
And
well, I want to touch on that for a moment, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What's the benefit of having the market determine the land use versus elected officials who are accountable to the public?
Well, your question
in a perfect world. Then I'll get back to
let's talk about reality. I mean, really, what we're describing is the concept of free market capitalism as versus socialism or fascism. In the case of socialism, is where the government owns the means of production.
Okay.
Fascism is where the government controls the means of production. And fascism is much more insidious because usually when government controls the private sector and something fails, the public doesn't blame the government. The government's behind the scenes. The government usually blames the business, the company. So in terms of healthcare, people can blame, for example, the insurance companies, but not the government for having the regulation that caused the problem of Obamacare, for example. Well, in real estate, it's no different. When you have a real estate market that is controlled by government through the private sector, they don't own the property, but in some cases they do.
Right.
Okay, in the case of the Nassau Mall, the hub, Nassau County actually owns the property.
Right.
So that's socialism. But most of Long Island is really fascist. Okay, so the government controls the private sector. Okay. When that happens, you don't have natural occurrences that determine what is built where. The best example I give in terms of especially when it involves doing something for the future, okay, put things in perspective, all the zoning ordinances, these zoning ordinances were written 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. That represents what the past wanted, right?
Right.
The people who are activists today, the people who live in these communities today, who form these groups, these civic associations, they represent the present.
Okay.
Okay? There's no representation of the future.
Yeah.
The future is represented by the developers and the users, the Neiman Marcus and the companies and the restaurants that want to move and open up a new establishment. What they're thinking in their mind is not the customer that died 5 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right.
They are thinking about the present. They're also thinking about the future. Where the future customers going to come from? If you have government planning, you're not really giving the future a vote because they don't exist.
That's fascinating. And we'll segue into the final portion of this discussion. Thank you very much. This has been great. You once said something to me that really resonated with me. You said, given that everything Long Island has to offer, I mean, we talked about the beaches and the North Fork and all the great things that everybody knows about.
Right.
Our biggest problem should be what to do with all the people who want to live here.
Right, right.
And our biggest problem is the young people are leaving in droves. And I'm working with the young professionals. We're creating an association called LINKS. It's an association of young professionals. And what we're trying to do, what we're working on, is getting the young professionals, the next generation of Long Island leaders to participate in the process.
It's a great idea.
Because your point's right on. A lot of the discussions are being led by people whose time has come and gone. I mean, it's still here, but it's not about them. It's about what does the future of Long Island look like?
Sure.
And we're talking about the next generation wants vibrant downtown environments. For better or for worse, that's what they want.
Well, some do. Some do.
Right.
Let me first jump on that statement you just made. There's this concept, this movement in land use called smart growth. Okay. Now, I think it's a euphemism. Okay. And again, it really is still a part of government planning. Dense or mixed-use development in a free market, in a market-oriented community, would happen naturally wherever it really would work. Okay.
Right.
So, for example, you probably wouldn't want to have, or wouldn't need to have residential over retail or residential over retail in a suburban area. You wouldn't go out to a cornfield and build some building with retail, and it wouldn't make sense. It's not economic. Doesn't make economic sense. Okay.
Right.
So, smart growth or the mixed-use development doesn't work everywhere. But if you have a freer market, it will be built where it will work.
Right.
Because a developer's not going to put at risk his money and his effort to build something he doesn't think is going to work. So it would happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there's an issue right now. For example, I read in Newsday yesterday that one of the towns or villages is cutting down on accessory apartments.
Right.
Okay. The young people you're speaking of, they need a place to live.
Right.
So a lot of them, when I was growing up, and I'm from Houston, Texas, when I graduated college, two friends of mine rented a house, and the three of us lived in a house.
Right.
You can't do that here in Long Island.
Right.
I mean, to me, or someone from outside of this area moving here, if they were to learn that, that would be a detriment for them coming here. They would think that's strange. People in Long Island think that's normal. Okay, but it isn't normal across the country. Okay. Some young people may want to live in a garden apartment. They may want to live in a loft. They might want to live in a high rise, a low rise.
You want that transitional housing. You come back from school. Obviously you don't want to live in a dormitory, but you don't want to live with your parents anymore either. But you're not ready for that single-family home, which is what was built almost exclusively on Long Island for 30, 40 years.
Or you might want to live in a one-bedroom, a two-bedroom. You might want to live in a garden apartment. You might want to live in a single-family home with other friends.
Right.
So this idea, I hear it all the time, these euphemisms like workforce housing and affordable housing. These are euphemisms that if you travel outside this area, okay, especially in these states that have regional zoning and don't have a problem with quote-unquote affordable housing, those terms don't have any meaning. If you went down and said workforce housing in Texas, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. Okay. So let's talk about for a moment how you get an affordable home. We're kind of getting off topic, but I think this is important. When you build when a developer builds a market-priced home, let's just say it's a $1 million home. Okay. Somebody typically will sell their, say, $700,000 home to buy that $1 million home.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So, and then somebody who buys that $700,000 home is going to sell their $250,000 home, and then somebody's going to leave their apartment that they're renting to buy the $250,000 home. So by building one market rate home, okay, this is an Urban Land Institute study.
Right.
They found in the course of 12 months, in the course of a year, when you build one market rate home, you create 2.5 transactions.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
However, if you have government impose an affordable housing mandate and force a developer to build a low-priced home, where otherwise he'd build a market-priced home, you only get one transaction in a year.
Okay.
You're forcing the developer to build a unit where otherwise a market-price home would be built and you'd have 2.5 transactions. You're only getting one.
Okay.
So, and you're creating less housing. So it actually has the opposite effect, okay? Plus, when you constrain what kind of housing people build, you don't know what kind of home or residence this young person is going to live in. It could be in town. They may want to live out on a farm. They may want to live near the ocean. They may want to, you can't restrict or have this idea that you're going to dictate what a young person's going to want to live at. You know, make sense?
You know, it does. And years ago, a builder shared with me, he said, all the affordable housing, all the workforce housing Long Island needs has already been built. Because that's what was built to accommodate the returning GIs from World War II and Korea. He said, the problem is they don't have anywhere to go. So you get the older folks out of their homes, you let them build the apartments over the stores in downtown, and you're in much better shape than we are now. But the key, and we'll close it with this, we have to have the future involved in the discussion. And that's really been lacking on Long Island. And I love the idea of maybe a little bit hands-off on the zoning and let the market dictate what needs to be done, and just let things flow a little better. And we're hoping that those are the solutions that we find. So this has been terrific. Cliff, I appreciate your time again. Cliff Sondock, the president of the Land Use Institute. And this has been Mr. Long Island Seeks Truth and Beauty. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.